Hello everyone, and good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whatever time it is. So obviously, this is my self-presentation PowerPoint, and today I'm just going to run through. We'll first start off with the objectives of the PowerPoint. You'll learn a little bit about me, about my personal life, and my background. And then we will discuss my chosen artist and how I think it is really important for people's to kind of know or learn, or even yourselves to know or learn and be inspired by this artist and how influential she or he can be. So let's get started. So, yeah, the learning objectives are to understand my background. Who am I? And what skill sets I've acquired throughout my life and my education so far. To understand the basic processes my artwork goes through, so what my artwork does and where it starts from, how it gets from the beginning and to the end, and finally to learn who my chosen artist is and how they can be inspiring in a classroom. So we'll start off with me. You've all seen me so far. Well, maybe some of you haven't, but this is me. A few things I love in life. The first things are my two dogs, Evie and Otis. That's them, two little border terriers. The next is my family. So there's me in the middle, my mum and my dad, and my two sisters. We're really close knit, and I think that's a really good value to have. We're really close, and we have a lot of exciting conversations about politics and art and design and what's going on in the world. The next is my friends. We have quite a big group of friends, but these are just some of my best friends. And hobbies wise, I'm really into cooking and baking and making anything food surrounded. So this is a lotus cheesecake that I made. I will give you the recipe if you need it. I don't eat meat, so I kind of like to cook vegetarian or pescatarian meals. So this was a Wagamama ramen that I made. And finally, I made some brownies, and you can see my boyfriend's just peeping his head in there. Finally, I'm a massive Harry Potter fan. So any other Harry Potter fans in the class, please do come up to me, and we'll talk all things Potter. So yeah, that's me. We'll now talk about, well, I didn't really know whether to include this, but I think it's key that you know kind of what I did at college just very briefly, because my BA and my MA courses are very niche and very specific. So I did photography. That's a little edgy little picture of me that I did in photography. I also did textiles at college, and I did English. Now, the reason I've included these three subjects that I covered was because studying photography, it was where I began to learn about Photoshop and all the digital elements of design. It introduced me to a number of artists on the photography and graphics design spectrum, and how my already hand illustrative techniques could be converted digitally. So I got to use obviously DSLR cameras, and I learned the techniques of that and how they could be transmitted digitally and how everything could develop and flow and create new ideas. And it's where I began to use, really, the first time where I began to use a sketchbook properly and really understand the use and the progression a textbook can make. I studied textiles, so obviously the usual kind of machine, hand sewing, observational drawing techniques were gained. I also learned how to print make, which was really handy when it came to photography, because I would take photographs, draw them, and then I would transmit them into Photoshop to make prints. But then sometimes I would combine the two, so maybe I would have edited a drawing in photography class and then took it back to textiles and edit it again to make a print. So the two subjects were kind of conversing with each other, and learning how I was learning how to connect skills together. I also did a lot of gallery and exhibition visits with the textiles course, which is kind of where I began to kind of see my love for artists, where I would maybe go to a gallery and be really inspired, and I felt all of a sudden passionate about a technique that maybe I didn't know anything about, and it really helped me kind of understand my passion for art and design and craft, and I wanted to know more. And finally, English. Now, I think it's really important to have good English skills in terms of annotation in sketchbooks. I found that like terminology that I'd learned in English classes really helped me analyze and annotate my work in my sketchbooks, and it really did kind of help emit things that I was trying to portray but maybe couldn't word them correctly. So yeah, that's that. Next is my BA degree. So I did a BA in footwear design, which is a little bit strange. I actually was originally going to do illustration in London. However, when I saw the footwear course, I just wanted to do it. You know, I like making things. I'm a very hands-on person, and I thought, you know, it's not something I've done before, and I was curious. I wanted to know more, and I thought, obviously, curiosity is what we are as creatives. So these are just a few, two designs that I'd created at my BA degree. That was my final project, and this one was a piece of footwear that I won a finalist award for. We'll get onto that later though. So I'm just going to walk you through a really brief, really quick way of how I process things and how I work from one point and get to the end within my BA degree. So the first thing, obviously, as we all know as creatives, is research. So I would go off. This one was a project based on taxidermy. So I actually went to the Manchester Museum of Taxidermy and took photographs and just took lots and lots of photographs, which allowed me to create a body of information. You know, I was learning about colours and patterns and all the things, and I was zooming in on images and zooming out of them and repeating them and seeing what I could create, what design lines I could get from the images. And then there's the other side. There's the actual, as a designer, it's always good to have inspirational influences from catwalk or anything fashion based. So I would always have to do a bit of research on, you know, current trends and current designers. And then there was the aspect of artist influences as well, because it's important to include artist influences. It's key to kind of mold to maybe find out where even the designers that I'm being inspired by have found their works from, which is probably more often than not, you know, we all use the same kind of artists. So the next important thing is in my university, my teacher once taught me the DDD process, and it was literally just develop. It was just keep going, keep trying to find new ideas, find a design line. So on the right hand side of the image, obviously you've got your butterfly wings and your dragonfly wings, and then I obviously took them in digitally into Photoshop and I printed them and copied them into little shapes, and then I went and explored and I drew and came up with new ideas, just really pushing it out and seeing what I could get from, you know, first-hand images. And then you've got your customer and color research. You've got your design lines, so you understand what kind of designs you've got, but then you need to be influenced by color, and you need to have kind of an inspiration board, and you need to have a material board. You need to know the kind of how you're actually going to make the product. So I always went to Pantone colour palette, and I would always kind of look at that, just because they usually have the colour of the year, which this year was green, which worked brilliantly for me as I was doing taxidermy and butterflies and all things green. So that would help me kind of understand what kind of colour concepts I was going to use. And then I used to always back that up with materials, because as a footwear designer, you know, you always have to consider the costings of materials and how the material's tendencies are. So sometimes a material might not act the way you want it to, or it might respond differently. And then your final collection begins. So we learn how a beginning design concept starts to demonstrate and become something that you actually can make physically and turn it into something that you want to make. So you've got, on this page I've put in my sole pattern designs, because obviously your sole designs are very key in footwear design. And then I've just put in some, just a little tiny handful of my hand illustrations, and then obviously followed by CAD illustrations. CAD illustrations are really important because when you go to companies and business in design, a lot of work nowadays is done online because we can alter things quicker through Photoshop and Illustrator rather than having to draw things all over again. So this is kind of what you come up with. Now, obviously, we're not manufacturers. You know, we have so many tools and so many workshops and lessons on how to make these things. But you have to understand that we're not manufacturers and that we don't have the industrial machines that you need to produce something that's ready to go out the doors. But the concept is there and the visual is there. So it's ready for you to, kind of understand where your design concept has come from and to the finished product. I've just popped in some other BA work just so you can kind of get a feel for who I am and what my influences are. Massively influenced by Camilla Walala and the Memphis movement in my BA final project. I love anything colour, or pastel. I'm very influenced by that kind of thing. Overall, skill sets acquired. I was able to critically research and analyze things, and but with a vast majority of it. So I wouldn't just research by using first-hand images or online images. I would use everything. So any influential background that gave me an incentive to design would influence me. So obviously first-hand, economical, design inspired, fashion influential, and colour and material research. It's all relevant. A clear understanding of ever-growing development plan of designs. So that just means basically it was the DDD, just keep going, keep exploring, keep using those lines. Use the same ones but flip them over. Find a new perspective and a new way to design from the same lines that you already have. I was able to acquire skills from obviously previously only really using hand illustration and develop them into CAD illustrations, which is really useful in today's society of online learning. And finally, I learned about technical skills. So I actually learned how to make footwear. I learned from the start to the end. I learned how things come together and that things take time. I learned how to experiment with materials. I was able to adapt the skills I'd already learned from college, such as my textiles background and my digital background. It all really came in use. And the butterfly taxidermy shoe, I was actually a finalist for the Young Designer of the Year award in 2017 for the National Cordwainers event. Now these people are hugely influential in the footwear world. They've created such designers as Nicholas Kirkwood, Sophia Webster. Vivian Westwood was part of it. There's quite a few. So I'll briefly talk about my MA Fashion Textile just because we are running out of time. So this is just some final images of my developed work. So I made some bag straps and some sandals. But the key thing about the master's course for me was that it really opened my eyes to design. It really made me think about the way I was doing things and why I was doing them and what happens next. I've got a design, but how can I really branch out from this and where can I push it to? And I was also able to evaluate and analyse the process throughout. So I was verbally and writing down things, thoughts, just anything that would push me further. That was the key thing in my master's degree. So the skill sets I acquired were an ability for critical thinking. So obviously, as well as the design side, I had to do business modules and written modules and really understand the concepts and the reasons of why I was designing those things or why I was influenced by those things, and then maybe looking at references that would support my influences, because there would have been someone else or a designer or a creative that has used those ways of development and used those ways of research, and that's the main part of it. It was to build myself and to have a wider perspective on all design aspects and not just the literal part. So finally, we'll talk about the chosen artist. Now, this artist is it's someone that I really really like. So she's called Yulia Brodskaya, and she makes images and portraits from paper. So she creates image. She basically experiments with depth and with texture, but all using the same materials. Now, I think that's really important in terms of like school and pupils because it combines the use of sculpture and drawing into one art form, and it may inspire children to develop and explore mixed mediums from the beginning. So if I introduce this artist to you and to those children, they'll already have an idea of how to use styles of design together, and they'll want to experiment, and they'll want to use different aspects of design and push them together and see what the outcomes are. I also think that she uses basic household materials, so she just uses paper and glue. And I think that they're really accessible materials, so most children will be able to create and use these materials. They'll have them lying around, or they're not expensive to buy, that kind of thing. I also think she covers and enhances the choice of colour. She's really good at kind of the background's black but everything's really bright, or the background's white and everything's really dark. She's really good at enhancing the colour and creating three-dimensional things out of something that's usually perceived to be two-dimensional. So that is pretty much everything. If you do have any questions, please do ask me. I'll be around at uni next week, so that'll be great. But yeah, that's everything. Thank you very much, and see you later.